Chapter 10, Lesson 2 on the real number system. Okay, the first type of numbers we're going to look at are rational numbers. And we've already talked about these, but these are numbers that can be written as a fraction. Written as a fraction. Okay, irrational numbers are then obviously numbers that cannot be written as a fraction. Okay, irrational numbers that we often see are pi and square roots of any number that's not a perfect square. So for example, the square root of 10 would be an irrational number, right? Because it doesn't repeat or doesn't terminate as a decimal. All right, when we talk about real numbers, it is just the set of rational and irrational numbers. When you get into high school, you're going to start talking about imaginary numbers, but you don't need to worry about them yet. Okay, so let's make a big diagram. So the numbers that we're going to be dealing with are all real numbers. And then we divide them into two groups, and we divide them into rational and irrational. So a number can only be one of those two things. And then if it's rational, it can be a couple different things. And a group of rational numbers are our integers. And then within our integers, we have our whole numbers. So when I think about irrational, I think about numbers like pi. I think about numbers like the square root of 5. I think about the numbers like 0.12122, and so on, that has a pattern, but it's not repeating. When I think about rational numbers, I think about numbers like 1/4, 5. I think about numbers like 0.2 repeating. I think about negative 7.3. I think about 5.5. Those are all rational numbers. When I think about integers, I think about 2 and 0 and negative 8 and negative 6 and 10. And when I think about whole numbers, I think about 0, 1, 2, 3, and so on. No negatives. Okay, so if I'm going to try to classify my numbers, an example, if I have 21/7, I want to first say, okay, that's a real number. And then is it irrational or rational? Well, it's rational. It's already written as a fraction. And then I want to say, is it an integer? Well, 21 divided by 7 is 3, so that's also an integer. And because it's 0 or positive, it's also a whole number. When I think about negative 2.5, I say, well, it's real and it's rational because it can be written as negative 2.5 or negative 5/2. And then I say, is it a integer? No, because it has the decimal part. Okay, if I have 0.2 repeating, it's real. It's rational because I know that I can write that as a fraction, 2/9. An integer? No, because it has a decimal. The square root of 38 is real, but it is irrational because 38 is not a perfect square. Okay, if I have to compare my rational and irrational numbers, I'm just going to estimate. So I'm going to say, okay, this is about 3.3 repeating, 3.3. And then if on my calculator I do the square root of 15, I get 3.9 or 3.87. And so I say 3 1/3 is less than the square root of 15. Okay, if I have negative 7.7 2/5, I'm going to say, well, that's like negative 7.4. Make sure in your notes I sent you an email. Please change that to be negative square root of 57. So if I take the square root of 57, it's negative 7.5. Or square root of 57 is 7.5, but I put a negative on it. So I'm going to have to choose which one is bigger. And remember, with negatives, we choose the one that appears to be smaller with the absolute value. Okay, if I'm going to order them, I'm going to do the same thing. Change them all to decimals. This is 8.8. This is 8. That's already a decimal. And then I'm going to do on my calculator the square root of 76, and I get 8.7. So when I put them in order, I say the first number is the square root of 64. The next number is 8.3 repeating. The next number is the square root of 76. And the last number is 8 4/5. Okay, if I'm going to solve equations, the first type of equation I'm going to solve is just a squared equals 36. So to get the a by itself, I do the square root. I have to do it to both sides, so a equals 6. But if we have a squared and we take the square root of it, we just get a. When I take the square root of 36, I actually get two answers. It is 6 or negative 6. Okay, we look at the next equation. 2n squared equals 170. The first thing I want to do is get that n squared by itself. So I'm going to divide both sides by 2 so that I have n squared equals 85. And then I'm going to do the square root of both sides. And I say n equals about 9.2 or negative 9.2.